ordinances. So a bit of the background on Liberty Street Market, just to give you a geographic perspective. The area in where the Liberty Street Vendors Market is located is called the Liberty Street Corridor. And geographically in our city, what we're talking about is around 5 miles from downtown. And it's a 3-mile stretch of Liberty Street from 7th Street up to Smith Reynolds Airport. And this is an area that for many years had a thriving Black business district, but was also plush with grocery stores and options for food, a thriving market as we define it as an economist, right? So I'm an economist, and this idea of market is sort of a competitive place of exchange where buyers can get what they want, sellers can sell what they want. And this area really was that. And so here I've got an article from the Winston-Salem Chronicle that ran in the late 70s that was actually discussing how in 1910, so about 110 years ago, there were over 100 Black grocers in Winston-Salem. And a number of them were very prominent grocery stores in this Liberty Street corridor. So for example, 1701 North Liberty for many years was Alicia's Grocery. Later it was East Side Grocery. The owners of the grocery store were very well known and important leaders within the Winston-Salem community. And over time, as areas of Winston-Salem received much more investment from city planning, taxpayer dollars, revitalization. Here we can think about areas like the Haynes Mall area. We can think about West Salem and the area where Salem College is. There had been concerns, especially in the early 90s, about underinvestment in the Liberty Street corridor area. And so some individuals like the late Mayor Pro Tem Vivian Burke had purchased a number of the buildings, including that grocery store, which remains an existing building, but it's vacant. But even, North Carolina Representative Larry Womble in the early 90s expressed a lot of concern in our local media and across the state about underinvestment in the Liberty Street corridor area. And so it was really around that time in the early 90s that city council members started exploring options to try to revitalize the former Black thriving business district that, again, we're sort of referring to as this 3-mile stretch on Liberty Street, which is where the current Liberty Street Vendors Market is. So the late Mayor Pro Tem Burke represented the Northeast Ward since the late 1970s. And in the 80s, she and a few other city representatives traveled around to get an idea of how vendors markets worked in other areas. For example, they went to California. In the 90s, a group went to Nashville, Tennessee, to really kind of collect some information and craft a development plan for the Liberty Street corridor. And this kind of touring and collecting information to develop a plan received some media press when the Liberty Street Vendors Market opened, kind of saying how they planned and collected this information. Some of the feedback that had been offered in terms of that planning process was, if we think about collecting information on developing markets in the 80s or mid 90s, and the market then was launched in 2014, perhaps the information wasn't quite as relevant or on the spot to where local needs and local demand were by the time that those ribbons were cut. So in 2014, there was a grand opening of the Liberty Street Market. It was slated to be open from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Thursdays through Saturdays. The city spent a good amount of money, about $35,000 designing the market, a little over $300,000 building it. There were some partnerships. The Liberty Community Development Corporation received a loan from the city who managed it. That corporation had some difficult transitions that they were unable as a corporation to kind of emerge from in terms of changing in leaderships. They had a longtime leader that stepped down. There was also a contract for the market to be managed by an individual who at the time was with the corporation, but then departed the corporation as well. And so there was a good amount of sort of logistical management challenges around how the market was managed, who was managing it, as well as some feedback from the city that the demand wasn't what they expected in terms of number of customers and things like that. And so this vision of a thriving produce market, a space where Thursdays through Saturdays, we could address the food desert aspect, the lack of produce and lack of access to nutritious fruits and vegetables, and community engagement that a typical market, vendors market, open air market provides, just wasn't brought to fruition in that initial run. And so it closed after a few months of opening in 2014. And then in 2016, the city formally announced some plans to try to revitalize the space. And so there was our initial city liaison, Regina Hall, who's wonderful and amazing, doing great work in our city right now in the Boston Thurman area. She was part of the city's launching of plans to revitalize. She put together a great YouTube video where it talked about some visions to revitalize the space, and also offered the space up for rental by community members. And so it was a pretty fair price if you consider the vastness of the space and the various amenities offered. So there's about 70 parking spots. One of the two pavilions is glassed in with sort of bay, I know they're not called garage doors, but they're sort of bay doors that lift up like garage doors. There's a lot of electric outlets, and they were offering at the $45 park pavilion rental fee. There was also a lot of concerns that were being collected by citizens in terms of the space being fenced off. And so part of this vision was to get that geography right. And so it's so close to Cleveland area homes. It's so close to a complete dearth of access to produce and community gathering spaces. And that kind of that iron fencing in may limit some of that community engagement.
I have a lot of plant material that I need to get out anyways, because it's all over the place. Yeah. So if we'll use it here, we could. You can pile them up.
And then in 2017, there was another short stint of an opening. It was pitched as an urban farmers market. It was mostly urban farmers who had graduated from farm school at Co-op Extension. But again, this was only a few months starting in July 2017. And the Urban Food Policy Council, since we began about 4 years ago, has always been tasked by the city in making recommendations for both the Liberty Street Vendors Market as well as the Carolina Classic Farmers Market over on Coliseum. And this was really an area that we were excited to begin working and exploring opportunities to utilize such an important geographic location and such an important vision in terms of addressing the food desert and the disappearance of so many grocery options and community gathering spaces for the Liberty Street corridor. So during the COVID shutdown, the council wrote and was funded with a grant through Community Food Strategies, which is out of NC State. They provided us a grant to do a pilot run of the Liberty Street Market, both addressing concerns of the COVID shutdown, less market access in terms of ability to go to inside grocery stores, but also for producers having much more restricted opportunities to vend what they were growing. And we were also very grateful to not only have a grant funded by Community Food Strategies Network, but to have immediate support from the city. So not only was Tiffany instrumental in doing so much behind the scenes work on the back end, but the city also provided a lot of support through finance, through getting SNAP and EBT accepted and managing the SNAP EBT. They also provided a good amount of staffing. And while the grant covered the rental fees for the Liberty Street Market to run from July through October, the city waived those fees for us, and that allowed us to not charge vendors, to do they paid for some mailings. We did some couponing, trying to also send out some media to local residents, giving some coupons that specifically extended SNAP and EBT amounts. And we began in July. We operated Friday afternoons. That time and day was voted on as the most popular by the vendors who were interested in selling at the market. And we were open every other week, July through the beginning of November. We extended a bit just because the weather was good enough and our vendors were still pulling good stuff out of the ground. We had a soft launch and then more of a formal grand opening a couple weeks later. That soft launch allowed us to kind of figure out what was working, what wasn't working. When should we hang signage? When should we open the gates? How do we get the good word out to make sure that when vendors spend their time and money to bring stuff to market, that they were able to move all of the things that they brought?
All right, so I will talk a little bit about where we're going from here this year with the Liberty Street Market. As Megan mentioned, working on the Liberty Street Market is, to a degree, part of their role as the Urban Food Policy Council from a recommendation standpoint, but they really took it a step further, when they helped to staff the market, when they helped to write the policies and procedures, when they helped to advertise and get vendors on board. So it was really a huge lift for them, and they really exceeded anything that they were expected to do. And so I was really happy to support on the effort. So next steps for the market for this year, I have sent out reapplications to all of our vendors and farmers that vended last year. And so waiting for responses on that. This piece is really critical because I'm trying to collect information about availability. We're trying to make a determination on, are we going to continue hosting the market every other Friday, the first and the third Friday from 4 to 6 p.m.? And is that what works best for our urban farmers and vendors? Or do we need to adjust? Because at the end of the day, we can't have a market without our farmers and vendors. So this whole initiative from the beginning has really been trying to get that grassroots support, trying to understand what works for our farmers and vendors and making decisions based on that information. So I'm collecting that information now. So far, it does seem like that Friday 4 to 6 is going to be the time that still continues to work for our farmers and vendors. As far as the frequency, is it going to be the first and third Friday? Will it be more often? I still need to evaluate that data, but at least we have a kind of a sense of it, of a date and time. And once that I finish collecting the applications from those vendors and farmers, we will extend the application out to the broader public. I hope to do that by April 19th, which will give us the chance to have some planning still in place and be able to goal launch for Friday, May 21st. That is the time that the farmers and vendors that we have been working with have let us know will be best for them in terms of when they've begun planting and when they'll actually have harvest. We have had SNAP EBT at the market. We have now switched to receiving some state support for SNAP EBT. So that's going to reduce some of the costs that we had to spend on transactions for SNAP EBT. So that's great. We'll be implementing that system and trying it out and have it ready for May 21st. The SNAP EBT process for our farmers and vendors is really simple. Most markets, you're familiar, use tokens, we have been using something called Snap Bucks, and they're used in much the same way. So your SNAP EBT recipients will come up to a table, let us know about how much they plan to spend. We'll give them the exchange of the SNAP Bucks, and they'll be able to spend that with our farmers and vendors that accept SNAP EBT. I will note that we do not require all of our vendors and farmers to accept SNAP EBT. Some of them, their products do not qualify for SNAP EBT. And for those that do, it's still an option. It's completely up to them. We do have a new vendor agreement form that we're working on developing. Since last year, really the Urban Food Policy Council ran it in-house, and now the city under my wheelhouse with food resilience programs is going to continue managing it for this year. We're trying to develop some criteria, not too much that's going to inhibit or exclude anyone from participating, but just enough to protect our urban farmers and vendors, especially because we're going to be adding a component this year where our community gardeners are eligible to vend. And so usually urban farmers, because they're vending in multiple markets, will have different certifications, will have different types of insurance. Our community gardeners are less likely to have that. And so we need to build out this form to protect them, also to protect the city and to protect our residents. And so I will have that available as well for our farmers and vendors when they do apply. And it will also be available when we publish our, I think I'll talk about it in the next slide, Liberty Street Market website. So some things that we're looking on adding in, I'm calling it version 2.0, being 1.0 being last year, although we know there was 0.001 and 0.002 and whatever, but marketing wise, we're going to be increasing some marketing efforts. Last year we send out mailers and bulletins to households that use SNAP EBT as currency within a 3-mile radius. We're going to expand that radius with our mailers this year. We're also going to work on partnering with area churches, trying to get it into church bulletins, and also trying to get our area pastors or area reverends to make announcements about the market. And also, with community gardens being able to vend at the market, maybe some of these churches would also like to sell some of the produce that they're growing. A lot of our churches in the community do have community gardens, so that might be an option to partner as well. We also will be launching yeah.
If I could add one thing, I think that maybe I glossed over is that the city also came to the market. The city came out to a number of markets. Any given market, we would have a number of individuals who just came by to get a sense of it, to really experience it. And I think I think it's all right to call it version 2.0, because what had happened in the past was the city wasn't running the market in the same way that the city runs the Carolina Classic Farmers Market. This is a taxpayer-owned, locally owned space, a city space, but I think what we were able to do through this pilot program was show to the city, who was collaborating with us and putting a lot of staffing into it, that it's a great space, and the city really wanted it to be involved as a public space rather than that private partnership.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, that's really important. Our city manager's office and our city council members were really pleased with what the Urban Food Policy Council was able to do. And from the feedback, of course, as Megan described, there's a long history behind it. And when we first started, we did receive a lot of that feedback and concerns that Megan mentioned. But moving forward, I heard a lot from community members about how pleased they were about the initiative we were taking on the feedback that they gave us. And that's something we want to continue to do. And all these items I've outlined on this slide are, have come out of community feedback, have come out of case studies done by college students, have come out by recommendations of the Urban Food Policy Council. And this is not the end. This is, what we're trying to pilot and test this year. Will continue to change throughout this year based on community feedback, maybe based on even some of the ideas that you all have as attendees here today. And we'll continue to adjust so that it is a true public community space. and that we're, considering our vendors and farmers first and foremost. And I hope that that point really gets across in any decision that we're making. We're trying to consider their needs, their availability, their schedules, the products that they're vending, so on and so forth. Moving forward, so we also want to work on incorporating live music and art demonstrations, but really to do that, lifting up area, community, and social capital. So not necessarily bringing in musicians from Pofftown or Louisville or West Winston-Salem, but really trying to see what musicians, see what artists that we have within, a 5-mile radius of that market, and prioritizing those people, much like we have with our farmers and vendors. Because I don't think, Megan, you mentioned this, but we do prioritize our urban farmers and vendors that are creating their product or growing their product within a 5-mile radius of that Liberty Street Market. Now, that doesn't mean that people beyond that 5-mile radius can't come and vend. It just means if we run out of space, we do have to remember that priority of geographic area. And I think, oh, go ahead, Megan. It looks like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, and I think there, again, not to sort of put this economist hat on, but when we use this idea of a thriving market, part of the opportunity in this geography is the food desert, the lack of access residents, consumers have. But the other half that's important, that's really, part of our mission and vision with the market, is on the seller's end, the producer's end, individuals having access to sustainable livelihoods and creating a sustainable livelihood path for individuals who produce those healthy, nutritious, fruits and vegetable based inputs to a quality of life, and so it's both sides, both the growing end, the producing end, as well as the consumer buying end, that we really prioritize being a neighborhood event, a community development, sustainable local event, because we know larger farmers, larger spaces of land, larger, so areas that have, just a larger scale of operation, have access to different market outlets, whether that's various retail outlets, various restaurants, or other existing farmers markets. And so when we really add to the food landscape of our broader Winston-Salem community, we want to also design a market that prioritizes producers who don't have as much market access, vending access in some of our existing opportunities.
And that carries over with our artists and with our musicians, just trying to, again, create opportunity within that core area and uplifting what's there. And our Urban Food Policy Council was a huge proponent of that. So another item is, you'll notice a lot of this is trying to build more partnerships. And that's going to be really critical for us as we develop this into a true community space. But partnering with local schools, something I left off here, but also recreation centers. Carol Eichmeyer was a big proponent of that as well, coming up with having students come out for field trips, learning about how those farmers and vendors produce their products, getting to talk with the farmers and vendors, getting to do activities that kind of promote that whole child well-being. So, getting the healthy food, maybe we have some jump ropes out there, maybe there's some activities we partner with the recreation center to put in place. And I'm going to skip down a little bit because I think it ties in, but also partnering with area restaurants and nutritionists. Again, looking at that whole picture of health for our youth, but also, for our families, for our adults, for our seniors. Are there restaurant owners, chefs in the area within that radius that are going to be willing to come out, maybe try to cook up a meal with some of the produce that's being vended right there in the spot, and having a nutritionist, again, from within that community, if we can identify one, to be able to share about healthy eating and talk about that whole process. So those pieces all really tie in together, as well as with inviting area food trucks. So it's a common theme, partnerships, really focusing in first on that localized area and then shifting out if we're not able to build a connection at the time. That doesn't mean if, say for some reason we can't find a nutritionist in that area that we can work with at the time, we might, expand beyond that 5-mile radius, but we're going to always come back to that. So just because one time we might have went out of the area doesn't mean that in the future we're not going to try to continue to meet that commitment and that priority we've made. The other thing we want to really strive to do is do greater data collection, ask for customer experience, ask for as people come into the market, what could be better? What would have made your experience better? What products are we missing? What do you really want to see? There's a range of people who were shopping at this market last year. Some of them were community members, some were, driving from a little bit farther. But asking folks, do they know anyone who wants to vend? Do you know anyone within, they might not know for sure 5 miles, but do you know someone who's growing close by that doesn't know about this opportunity? Can you connect us with them? And we did do some of that this past go around, but in order to ensure the long-term success, we need to start develop, some metrics and measures that we can continuously develop to grow the initiative. And I think I mentioned this a little bit, but also having vendor demonstrations. So we've talked a lot about bringing other folks in, nutritionists, restaurants, food trucks, but also uplifting our vendors and farmers to do demonstrations on their own work. If we have someone who is producing honey, is there some sort of demonstration that they can do with bottling their honey? I'm not sure, but what is it that we can do to make it more of an experience, to make it more of a learning experience for our customers? And all of these things are really going to enhance the marketing that we do. So all of this really feeds back into each other. And Megan, I noticed you look like you wanted to add something.
Well, and I was also going to say that, continuity is going to be important on both ends of the market, but especially on the vendors, producers, et cetera, affiliated with the market, because again, not to be that agriculturalist, but planting decisions take place many, many months in advance. And so once local producers come to sort of settle on the reliance of the regular pattern of this market, they'll also, in a way, extend the network of people considering vending, because there's such risk at sort of planting and not knowing, will there be the local demand? Will there be local opportunities to vend what you're producing? And so I think there we're looking at some great opportunities in that medium-term planning horizon. The more this market is regular and takes place for a few years, and individuals start to trust more that it's going to be more permanent than it has in the past.
I think that's a really important point. I remember people walking by as we were just starting to do this, and they were wondering what we were doing. And week after week, they were kind of like, oh, you're back here again. Oh, is this going to be a recurring thing? And towards the end when we were wrapping up, was like, well, are you going to do this next year? People want to know that we're going to continue to show up. And we are. And we want to do it again in a way that first we're looking at our urban farmers and vendors, because we wouldn't have a market without them. And we start to take in that community feedback and continue to show up. It's a great point. I am going a lot faster than I expected. So what I think I might ask is, let me stop sharing for a second. Michael and David and Carol, I know you all were prepared for this. Tambila as well, Brandon, I see you all are on. Tambila Covington and Brandon Williams are also on our Urban Food Policy Council. But I wondered if you all had anything to add to what Megan and I have shared here today, based on your experience visiting or some of the recommendations that you've shared. Michael, you also vend at the market. Do you have any thoughts you want to share about the Liberty Street Market?
Pardon me, y'all. I was just enjoying a little breakfast. I think y'all done a great job at outlining the history, and I've learned a few things because, you know, even though I have an advanced age, my history don't stretch back to 1910, so I wasn't aware of all these like 100 grocers in the area. You know what I mean? Even though I do remember in the 90s, there's a brother named, or old man named Mr. Burley, who had that corner right there at 1701 East 17th Street. So I didn't know that that history stretched back, and that was a grocer way back in the day. But I do remember Mr. Shaw, who was over the Liberty Street development corridor. I think it was like a RUCA project, and part of me, I'm not real swift with the acronyms and stuff. But I always like to remind and always hold my ancestor up, Mr. Hashim Sali, who was like a champion in the food world. He was a drummer of Otasha Arts, and he used to really be adamant about, you know, who feeds you controls you. And he said the best way that we could remedy that was to create a farmer's market right there on Liberty. And if he was alive today, even though his son Aaron with Granville Farms is taking on the responsibility of carrying out that culture. And I'm just really proud of your work. You know, I can't say enough about Megan and Tiffany, like how y'all really, you know, answered the call, with the EBT SNAP, because that was such a great concern. Like, we didn't want to just put a farmer's market on Liberty that people couldn't access and really, be able to participate and get the food from, since it's such a depressed area and it's not a lot of money flowing around. So that was so crucial that in the restarting of this farmer's market that you made EBT SNAP available. I feel some of the proverbial fences and barriers coming down, people feeling more, involved. And, I love what you're doing with the arts, with the, putting a priority with the artists in the community. That's near and dear to our hearts, just like food is. Like, it's a lot of artists in the area. And I think that that's really going to energize in this version 2, 2.0 that's coming up. I think the artists of the area really going to be encouraged to come up there and just show their best parts, especially in light of like the violence and the crime that's been, really prevalent up there at Sitco and in the area, to be able to kind of lighten up that spot. I think it's very, very, really great. So much respect to you both and everyone else who's involved in this project. And I look forward to great things coming out of this space.
I was on mute. I was going to say, you're going to vend with us again, right? Oh, yeah.
I'm doing my best. I'm going to bring everything I got. You know what I'm saying?
Good.
We're kind of behind on our agriculture right now. We've been chasing chickens like the whole spring. So if we ain't got nothing, we're going to have eggs. But yes, definitely going to vend with you.
Good. Carol, you look like you were going to say something before.
I think the continuity issue is really important, but it's also an opportunity for other city services to display themselves. If we make it more of a community one stop, we will do a better job of getting people to come by for a reason, maybe not food, and then go home informed and full. So if it's possible to get information from even the school system, that'll help. It's a great facility. If I lived in the neighborhood, I would be angry that it's locked up as much as it is. So the more we can use it, the better for the community.
Thank you, Carol. Reverend Harrison, Elder Covington, Brandon Williams, would you like to share anything?
Yeah, from my experience there, especially in 2020, it was such an important communal space for the community to come. For people to see how each other were doing, to check in that space. So it went far beyond food. And the one thing that I can say, something that you spoke to, is the community is they want to know that you're coming back, that it's not just a one-stop shop thing. And the fact that, you kept showing up time and time again shows that, we're in this to support the community for the long haul. So I think that this space is a fantastic space. It is a wonderful communal space for everybody to come, to connect. And like you all spoke to, on Fridays, people who don't know what's going on, they stop by, they want to see what's happening here, what's going, and you just start talking, and next thing you know, you're talking about all types of stuff, and you might know this person from this place, or they know your cousin. I mean, it's just a fantastic space to be at, and I'm excited to be a part of this and excited to see where we're going in the future.
Thank you. Elder Covington or Brandon, I don't know if you all have anything you want to add.
Sure. I just wanted to piggyback off of that, on that fact that Megan shared earlier with the 100 plus grocery stores that once occupied the Liberty Street area. It's ironic. The other night I was watching, I was binge watching the four-part series of the Rise to Prominence show, which I think it was Margaret Johnson, and it was another a renowned proprietor in the community, and they did a 4-part series on Black businesses and different types of just a trip down the memory lane. And in that 4-part series, they made reference to the 100 plus grocery stores, give them some by name, different places, just different maps and things of that nature. So my thing is, from a nostalgia standpoint, being able to revitalize, using some of the blueprints, using what worked, and just being able to, reconnect the community with, food access and food security through having a model. That's one thing that we were talking about, being able to sustain and being able to show the community the continuity in the the Liberty Farmers Market. So I believe you guys did a great job. I would encourage you all to check out, if you have time, the Rise to Prominence show. On YouTube, it's a 4-part series to kind of give you a lot more information in terms of how things used to be, and kind of just give you a little a journey in terms of how things can be moving forward, especially with the unknown new normal. So I think it's a great opportunity. It has a lot of potential. I think each year, and the more and more visibility that we have, I think that's a way to reinforce more community buy-in. So I'm looking forward to what 2021 brings in terms of the Liberty Farmers Market. And I'm just anxious, so again, you guys did a great job.
Thank you, Brandon. Elder Covington, is there anything you would like to add? Perhaps not, but I really appreciate all of the Urban Food Policy Council members here today sharing their thoughts and their experiences at the Liberty Street Market. Though they might not be necessarily officially staffing the market this year, I'm sure they will be present volunteering. I'm going to volunteer them to come. And, some of them will be selling. But y'all's recommendations just have been instrumental in making this initiative happen. And I really expect you all to continuously hold me accountable as well as we do this work. So,
and I think here we have a question from a participant, Kenzie.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, I'm Kinsey Davis-Simpey. I work at the Forsyth County Department of Public Health. And I apologize, we're outside working a vaccine clinic. So I apologize if it's a little loud in the background. But I just wanted to ask, I've worked alongside Michael and some other people in the food, and just like working with them and learning from them for a little bit. And I know one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that it seems like there can be these tides and waves of like things that people coming along and things seeming like they're going to turn a tide and towards, being more community oriented and working well for the community and kind of coming alongside and helping really lift up the efforts that they've been doing for a while. And then they either fizzle out or then we get these other things, or there's other influences that happen. And so I kind of wanted to know what is a way that you all plan on really strengthening this so that long term, whenever either some of you all roll off the policy council or there's changes around that area of the community, because we know that other people are looking at buying different parts of the community, some of these things are still strong in structure, and we don't have other external influences come in and change how this policy or how this kind of initiative ends up looking, to where it is more oriented towards other parts of the community and not those who need it the most. And if that question doesn't make sense, I can try and reword it a little bit. But I want to make sure, like, long term, it always suits who needs it the most, because this is a very vulnerable part of town. And when I say vulnerable, I mean vulnerable to being taken advantage of by outside influences who want to come in and like profit off of it. So I guess, what are we doing to like really make it safe long term?
Yeah, I think, Kenzie, that is a well-worded question and a valid question. And at least for myself, we can't guarantee it because we know that vulnerability, but we're trying, and we're trying to keep that at the forefront of the design and the planning. And so I think perhaps what we're trying to do is hedge the risk, but we can't really eliminate that risk or vulnerability, so I think part of it is the city running it rather than it being privately run. I think that the more we have a very engaged, direct relationship with the city council members who represent that ward, as well as who've been instrumental in some of the design of this council. So to me, I'm thinking of Scipio and Mayor Pro Tem Adams, who are very directly engaged in our council, attend not only the market, but attend our meetings regularly, but also looking at the opportunity for it to be a publicly run space with this as the mission and design. We can't guarantee it, but as a council, it is one of our 10 duties. I hope that our council never goes away, but certainly it would take the city council voting to change our 10 duties. And one of those duties includes this specific space. But it's a very valid concern and something very high on our agenda in terms of the market. And I think, I speak for everyone on the council saying that's something that comes up again and again, and informs some of those priorities. We got a lot of pushback on why the 5-mile radius, and because it's really important, because that's the aspect of community development. That's the aspect of individuals who have been excluded from market access. And I don't know that we know how to completely avoid that risk of exploitation, of profiteering. It continues to be something we need, at least myself, needs to do better on. In my opinion, the city and shareholders need to do better on, but it's something that we talk about, we acknowledge, and we try to really build into the design. So I'd love to turn it over for other thoughts from the council on that.
Okay, I understand. I know something that I think would be a great possible model or maybe proposal to look into, to present to the city, that maybe this is something y'all have already done. I'm not sure, but is, instead of it being like a city owned or led, would be a more cooperative based owned and led, where it is owned and led by the community, because then it's the community has a higher stake in it. And I see those models seem to work a lot better in some other places. And I know there's a lot of research on certain things like that, and I can't pull them off the top of my head, but that's some of the work that I do in my position at the health department. is looking at things like that, right, in regards to food disparities and food deserts, and how cooperatives tend to address a lot of that, and especially in relation when you tie them into things like urban farming and healthy retail stores, and you just create this whole system of cooperative food ownership. And again, a lot of this is things that I've been very privileged to learn from people like Michael and Marcus and Cassie and some other really great people. So I need to give them their kudos because I wouldn't learn these things if it wasn't for them. But I think that would be a great proposal of something that might help alleviate that issue, if it's something that could be considered.
I think it certainly is considered. Marcus has been a member of the council, and certainly we've worked extensively both on and off the council with Marcus, as well as Michael being our inaugural chair. I know Cassie Mapamid not quite as well through this work, but I think we as a council would welcome any references, models, more information you may have for us as a council to look at and or to share with the city in terms of how those co-op ownership models could function. I think some of the things that, at least from the history of this market, haven't worked are a private partnership. And so there's a lot of risk of having a privately owned or limited liability company, whether that's, turnover that then doesn't have the investment in the market, or perhaps missions or visions change when there's leadership turnover. And so something like a co-op model, a shareholder model, certainly disperses that decision-making in a much more communal level.
I agree. And I know myself as a member and a stakeholder in the community, I try to do run an incubator relationship with a lot of up and coming growers or individuals who express interest. And I try to give them that technical support, any type of resources, seed, tools, any type of information to get them started. And what I found is that being able to really work with people and building those relationships and showing them how to grow and kind of just filling those gaps where there may be some reluctancy or just not being informed on the best way to get started. As a member, I think those are good ways to kind of encourage more people to participate and to be mainstays at the market. I try to at least incubate 3 to 4 groups of gardeners, farmers within that area to try to get them to a point where they will be visible at the Liberty Street Market. So I say, for example, this upcoming market year, the goal is, and I think we're there, to have at least, myself to at least bring 3 or 4 new vendors to the Liberty Street Market to really showcase and add value that way. So I think it's going out there, understanding or assessing the needs of those who want to participate, but not sure just how, and really trying to encourage them and give them that ongoing support. And to get them there are ways to kind of reinforce the value and to really kind of show and create that sense of community. And with that collaborative and consortium essence in terms of it, so I just think being visible in the community and being accessible are ways to kind of really promote and reinforce that community buy-in.
I think another thing that we need to be paying attention to is the community partnerships. If we can do them properly, we can create a scaffold for the growth of the market and the food buy-in. And that might help provide longer term continuity. So churches, neighborhood associations, local schools, social clubs, anybody that we can find to help support this. We need to annex if they're willing to be annexed, so that the city can, until it's ready to turn loose, can take a back seat, I think about if you want to use a growth analogy, if you're going to do a tomato, not in a bag, you need some kind of a structure for it to grow on. And that's what I see the city's involvement to be, is a structure to grow on so that the plant gets strong and then it takes off. And maybe you need a little bit of support going on, but you don't need as much down the road. So that's what I see our role as doing.
Thank you, Carol. Chuck, you wanted to add some thoughts as well?
Yes, I'm going to have to leave in a moment, and I really didn't want to change the tenor of the conversation that you're on, but I'll be brief. I'm the project manager for Winston-Salem Rise, which is a new initiative here in the city. Michael Banner serves as part of our leadership, along with 19 other Black community leaders. We've been meeting since June of last year. We're looking forward to holding a summit in the fall and having some lead up programs to that, in which we address 8 disparities around such things as education, housing. I like to say food security rather than food insecurity, because it lets me know the hope that I have we're going to accomplish. Economic development, jobs and workforce development, health and wellness, criminal justice. It's a big project. Each one of those areas will have 5 workshops in which we sit in groups to discuss, to learn, to share, to come up with action plans, to advocate. So I'd like to make sure that each one of you are invited to those work groups. Right now, our website is under construction. And so again, but if you could get your contact information and affiliation and interest, you may be interested in the food group, you may be interested in one of the other areas. Unfortunately, because these work groups are going to run simultaneously on Zoom, that you'll only be able to participate in one. We are looking forward to having a 2-day summit at the end of the work groups where we'll bring everybody together. That may, in the first part of November, be able to be in person, on Zoom or hybrid, for those who don't feel comfortable meeting in person. So I'm excited about what I hear about the Liberty Street Market 2.0. And I would encourage you to have your voices in the room as we move forward with this. It's getting some great community support, both institutionally. It looks to be a grassroots up organization. We want half of the people in the rooms at least to be representatives of community residents of the most affected areas of these disparities. So we're working hard to bring those folks to the table. And so I just thank you. And so, Michael, I'm going to make you the contact person for this group until I can connect with them.
Thank you, Chuck. It sounds like a great venue for conversation as well. And all these issues certainly intersect, don't they? So, when it comes to the point in time, if you have a graphic or information that you want me to send out to this attendee list, I'm happy to do so as well. So keep that in mind.
Thank you so much.
We're kind of in open forum right now, but are there other thoughts that people want to share, things that you want the council or the city to consider with the Liberty Street Market, questions that you may have?
What was your school? I noticed on your presentation you had school involvement, but I didn't hear you mention anything about that. And I was just curious.
Yeah, we haven't set up the actual partnership yet, but that is something that we're going to explore doing now that schools are going back in session. It's been a little bit chaotic for trying to build school partnerships these days. But that's something that we want to do for this summer, and trying to build relationships where teachers, perhaps, with you would make sense as well, to come up with something that's a learning experience. from the school standpoint, there's elementary schools, there's middle schools, there's high schools, of course, but also thinking through what can we develop with our area colleges? Are there work study opportunities that we can create as well? So it's flexible right now. It's something we want to pursue and people have asked us to pursue. But if you're interested in partnering, I would love to talk to you about it.
I do know, I'm sorry. I do know that I'm going to be partnering with a lot of schools in terms, upcoming this year, once we open the Kimberly Park hydroponics facility, so I'm definitely looking forward to working with schools to get kids in, get some hands-on training, to expose them to opportunities in the STEM area, science, technology, engineering, and math through ag, because it's a lot of opportunities, and just really trying to show them how to be sustainable and how to be agripreneurs. So, that's one thing that I will have an open invite to a lot of the schools as far as having, kids to come in and to get some experience in terms of hydroponics.
Great.
So that's one element.
And hopefully we could build that in, Brendan, since you are on the UFPC as well. We
Absolutely.
can connect these dots all together.
Absolutely.
Other
I just wanted,
questions?
Brandon mentioned the hydroponic thing. I just got a grant for some hydroponic stands for actually in my classroom. So I would like to get some more information about that. It's right up my alley.
Absolutely. I think I read an article about you last week in the journal. So I'm looking forward to that collaboration. Let's grow.
Great. Other thoughts, questions, ideas?
What is the data saying about the vendors in the area? Since I'm new to this Liberty Street Market, and my students before the pandemic, we were just getting into taking our school produce to farmers markets, and then COVID, and then that just ended that part of my project with my school outdoor garden. But what is the data around the 5-mile radius types of vendors that come to the market? What is that sort of organizational structure behind that? Like, what types of people are showing up? And then we talk about the agripreneurial side of it. Are these like businesses? Are they just organizations, churches, schools, et cetera, that are showing up at the market? And pardon my ignorance.
No, it's a great question. It's diverse. And I think especially, at least in my opinion, because we didn't have a lead growing season or planning horizon for certain types of products, we put the word out. We did a lot of grassroots outreach. For example, Michael Banner is a member of a thriving community that does a lot of agripreneurship and produces a lot of food from the ground. We sort of had that grassroots network approach. And so we had some farmers with produce, and that produce extended from vegetables, sometimes fruits, to also a lot of herbs and things like that. We also had a number of vendors who were transforming local produce, local products into ready-to-eat snacks. And so there we had, for example, I think about Happy Foods and I can't remember the next iteration of Mati Spa had a lot of beauty products or ready to eat, ready to consume lemonades and snacks, baked goods, things like that. And then we had a few vendors that exist in the community more with products that would change each week. And so we had one vendor who really kind of had this vision of more the community end. And so some weeks would come with kettle corn, which really got the smell outreach out there to passersby, or t-shirts that were really on the pulse of the campaigns that were going on during the market, as well as produce. And so there it really ran the gamut, mostly from raw vegetables more than fruits. That's some of a seasonal issue. Herbs, and then sort of prepared snack items, food items that had been transformed from farmers in Happy Hill, farmers from the island community, and things like that. Any other, and then some beauty products as well. Any other areas I'm leaving out?
I think you covered a lot of it. The products definitely ran the gamut, and you forgive me if I'm repeating some of what you said, but we had, some farmers that had a larger scale of produce that they had available to vend. Some of them had a very small scale. They might sell out within 30 minutes, but that's what they could produce, and that's fine for us. Whatever they could bring to market, the door is kind of open. And we're trying to, people might consider themselves an urban farmer. They might just consider themselves a community gardener. Those lines are really blurry. And so that's why we're including the language this year of, if you're a community gardener, you can vend. And we're trying to set up this form so that we're all covered, we're covering the bases, but community gardeners can vend. So that'll be new and interesting, especially because I know there's a lot of schools with community gardens. There's a lot of churches with community gardens. So that's going to be something that we're going to try to set up as much infrastructure with the vendor agreement form that we can. And will also be some figuring it out as we go in what works and what works best in a partnership with a school versus a partnership with the church.
So piggybacking off of that, you mentioned earlier about SNAP EBT, and there's requirements for certain things that could be bought. Now, I'm personally curious as to what that is. I could do my own research on that, or if there's a list, but thinking off the top of my head, is there any initiative to have specific community gardeners grow those types of crops that are purchasable? You know what I mean? Like you could like focus into, if whatever the data says, the amount of people that are purchasing with SNAP EBT, if that's even something worthy of looking at, into growing specific crops that could be purchased with that sort of intentionality behind the things that are marketed and grown in the community. If that makes any sense?
Yeah, Megan's put in the chat some of the items, but I'll read them out loud as well. Fresh fruits, veggies, dairy products, baked goods, meat, eggs, fish, poultry, honey, jams and jellies, food producing plants. So there's a large range, and we do provide our vendors with a listing of what they can accept for. Some of our vendors, like I mentioned, can accept SNAP EBT. So we kind of look at each table and have a discussion with our vendors and farmers to say, okay, this is an option for you. This is not. If it is an option, would you like to accept SNAP EBT? And this is what the process looks like. In terms of what you're saying, I think that's a really fantastic suggestion, especially we can somewhat do that in 2.0, but that might be a little bit more of a 3.0 idea in my head, as you start to collect that customer feedback. What do people want? And because you kind of have to plan out in advance what you're gonna grow. And I know we're within that growing season. And that's what products are growing are going to change over that time period. But I think it's a great idea. It might be more of a 3.0 one when we have a little bit more foresight on what customers want, but we can start talking about it now, which I think would be important to start talking about now, building that infrastructure. I think that's fantastic, actually, and something I had not thought of.
And my last question, I'm not going to commandeer this because I'm new to this and I appreciate all your patience. Is there any requirements for being organic, or is it just sort of, let's get people in and then work out some of the nuances of that sort of thing?
There certainly isn't. And so I think that when we look at kind of the design of the SNAP EBT, it follows the same idea of why there's not organic requirements. And so certainly many of our vendors marketed and had signage about natural growing practices. The organic certification is cost prohibitive for most scale local farmers. And for myself, again, as an agricultural economist, when you actually dig deep into, let's say, USDA organic certification, it doesn't mean the things that a typical consumer expects, which is no pesticides. It means the right amount of pesticides and an inspector having access to a bathroom. And so I think there seems to be a good amount of our vendors who are very proud to promote their natural growing methods, their sustainable methods, which are important to land stewardship and overall community health. But there is no requirement for certification, certainly. And we hadn't yet gotten to the point of even suggesting certain growing methods, but I'll say, if anyone else wants to kind of echo the sentiment, that most of our vendors were proud to promote their natural growing methods, low uses of pesticides, fertilizers, but didn't have that organic certification. The other thing I'll say, just to piggyback on the SNAP EBT, the SNAP EBT tends to be very cost prohibitive for vendors to accept. And so this was really an area of city support where they handled not only the back end part of it, but also it is a break even for vendors to accept it. And so it's exactly what it costs the city. I think it's a 3%. That it costs vendors. And so their vendors can choose their timing of cashing out. And the city really invested efforts, not only in sort of the labor costs, but invested in the equipment and all of that. And from a vendor's perspective, it's about 3% that the EBT SNAP costs to accept, right? And the vendors take the tokens, and the city, when they turn the tokens in, issues reimbursement at about a 2-week rate. But vendors could wait and hold their tokens for as long as they want to kind of, not get a $12 check, let's say. So part of that too is just acknowledging what works best for vendors and what's going to allow vendors to thrive and be able to invest more in the market and the planning to get more of those healthy, nutritious foods out to the community.
And just to add to that, something that I hope that you're noticing is we're trying to reduce as many barriers to entry as possible. And the other thing I should have mentioned, there's always things that come up that you forget, right? Our vendors do not pay to have a space at the Liberty Street Market. We have been asking, this last year we asked them to bring a table, and we probably will still ask them to do that this coming year, but that's all that we ask. Bring your table, show up. Look at our policy document, and that's, sign it, and that's it. So really trying to reduce those barriers to entry.
And some of the bring your own table was also COVID concerns. And so there, again, I'll appreciate that the city filled us with PPE for vendors and customers. And in the very beginnings of the market, when PPE was scarce, especially for passersby to the market, we really tried to just offer single wrapped masks and things like that. Of course, we required masks for entrance. We required masking for vendors, but we provided all of that. We provided, the city rather provided the PPE, gloves, masks, disinfectant, hand sanitizer. And so I think there too, Tiffany, part of the BYOT, bring your own table, was around COVID concerns and how we really on the back end guarantee some of that sanitation and concern that was going on with COVID too.
Yeah, that's right. Any other questions or thoughts? Well, what I want to do real quick here, and I can post this in the chat as well, but I just wanted to point out that the Urban Food Policy Council does meet every second Thursday of the month at 6 p.m. And the meetings usually run till about 7, sometimes 7:30. They're live on YouTube, so you can just log on to the City of Winston-Salem's YouTube account and watch them there. For now, at least, while we're still doing meetings virtually. I'm not sure when that shift will happen to in-person again. But if you're also interested in joining the UFPC meeting for the purpose of asking for some time on the agenda or wanting to partner on policy or wanting to share some information with the Urban Food Policy Council, you can contact me, Tiffany Oliva at toliva@cityofws.org, or you can also reach out to Megan. And Megan, I don't know if you'd be willing to put your email in the chat as the chair, and I'm sure Megan would be happy to discuss what you're interested in talking about or partnering on. In terms of the Liberty Street Market, again, feel free to contact me. You could probably also contact Megan, but since I'll be having more of a direct hand on that now, it'd probably be best to contact me about your interest in partnering. To also take off some of the pressure on you, if you want to partner and you know that now, you can also send me your email in the chat, and I will be happy to get in contact with you as well, just to take off that extra layer of you having to reach out to me. There is another session at 11:30. We're going to be taking a break. You may or may not have registered for that session, but you're welcome to join. It's in this same Zoom room, and it will be on policies and ordinances related to food access. And unless there's anything you'd like to add, Megan, that might be it.
I want to thank everyone for your time today. I know time is our most precious resource we haven't figured out how to make more of, as well as contribution ideas. And I think we all, on behalf of the council, hope that you either become a greater stakeholder in the Liberty Street Market or consider being a stakeholder in this market. We're all really excited about it and are grateful for your time and thoughts today.
Be well, everyone. You're welcome to stay in the meeting with cameras off until 11:30 or just pop back in the room later. See ya.